Well, good evening, everybody. Nice to be back for another concert tonight. I apologize for the slightly late start, but a couple of things happened at once that I couldn't control. We're having a bit of a rainstorm here today. I don't know if you can hear it on the live stream, but the power went out right when I was about to start the concert and had to restart my computer and so forth. But anyhow, tonight's performance will be a lot of fun. I'm happy to take requests as always, and however, the theme for the concert is going to be the greatest songs you've never heard. So maybe a few that I've never played before, which is something I like to do. I know request nights like I did last week are popular, but it doesn't challenge me as a musician quite as much. So tonight will be fun, and I'm going to start out with a rag that I think makes a good opener for some of the concerts that I do. And it was fairly well known at the time, but has been forgotten over the years. We're going to do Tom Turpin's St. Louis Rag. Thank you so much. St. Louis Rag, written by Tom Turpin, who owned the Rosebud Saloon in St. Louis. It was written in 1903 for the Louisiana Purchase Exposition, and I don't know if any of his rags are really famous. That was probably the more successful one, but again, tonight's concert is called The Greatest Songs You've Never Heard, and as such, I'm going to play a few for you by one of my very favorite ragtime writers, Joe Jordan, whose music I think is underappreciated. And of course, he was known for two big hits, Lovey Joe, the song that made Fanny Brice famous, and that Teasin' Rag. But that Teasin' Rag is really a song. That's the version everybody plays. And however, Joe Jordan wrote a number of instrumental rags that hardly anyone ever plays. And this is probably the best of all of them. It's called Nappy Lee, and I do have an original copy of it, but it's in a picture frame, so I thought I would show you this giant Xerox copy. And yes, that is Nappy Lee himself on the cover of the music. who was a trombonist with crazy hair. This is a traditional rag published in 1903 in Des Moines, Iowa. Joe Jordan was probably touring the country and traveled through there around that time, and that's when this piece of music came out. So here's another great tune that maybe you've never heard. Thank you so much, Nappy Lee, a slow drag by Joe Jordan. Oh, I thought the rain had stopped and it's still going. Well, virtual concerts aren't perfect. What can I say? I sure hope the power doesn't go out. If it were to do that, I will try and restart the video stream tonight. I'm just checking on all the websites, making sure everything's working. Well, guess what? Amy and Marilyn, you're going to get to hear Corsica without even having to ask for it, because this piece of music was unpublished. And I just played another tune by Joe Jordan. I think it fits in. This was written in 1909, the same year he wrote the Tease and Rag. And it's a gorgeous piece, although I've never felt like the verse fits very well with the rest of the song. So I play it the way that Johnny Maddox used to play it, with At the Ball, That's All thrown in the middle of it. Here's Joe Jordan's Corsica, That French Rag. Thank you very much. I knew that would make Amy and Marilyn happy because they're always asking me to play that tune. I just try and space it out a little bit, you know. Of course, it will always remind me of Johnny Maddox because he learned it from the composer, Joe Jordan. And the music was never published. Thankfully, I do have a copy of the manuscript, but the music was never published. And Johnny taught me a few things that you would never know unless you were around to watch the composer himself play it, such as using your thumb to accent the melody here. Johnny told me that's how Joe Jordan himself played the piece. Boy, the rain is loud, and it's a little more noticeable because Rod Barker, who owns this home, put a new steel roof on the house last summer, so the rain really makes a lot of noise. You probably can't even hear it on the live stream. Anyway, and if you are enjoying the music tonight, I accept virtual tips for these performances. All you have to do is send in a tip on PayPal or Venmo, and the information should be in the chat and the postings on all three websites. Every little bit helps with my career, and it's not easy to make a career playing this kind of music. Let's leave it at that for now. And of course, I'm always happy to take requests. Please consider sending a tip if I manage to play one of your requests on Sunday nights. But I do have some neat stuff already planned that I want to play for you. The greatest songs you've never heard. And here's one of them. I like to point out to people that I do not just play ragtime. Of course, it has always been one of my greatest passions, but I also love early jazz and early blues. And here's a tune written by W.C. Handy, who was called the father, originator, and creator of the blues. This is probably one of his lesser-known tunes, and here's the original edition of it. It's called Aunt Haggers Children Blues. I have no idea why there's a giant question mark on the cover of the piece of music. Later on, Children was removed from the title, and it was simply called Aunt Haggers Blues. Now this is from 1921. By then, ragtime was really out of vogue, but W.C. Handy's blues sounds as good as ever. Here's Aunt Haggers Blues. Thank you very much, and Haggers Blues. I think that's one of the only ones of his tunes, at least the famous ones, that I don't know by heart. This is one of those pieces which was famous at the time, but has been more forgotten in the ensuing decades, and that will be the case with many of the songs that I'm playing tonight. Spring Fever, guys, I played that not too long ago. I think I've played that twice in fairly recent virtual concerts, so forgive me if I don't do that tonight. Oh, I see Joe Sales listening, my friend from Arizona. Yes, I can hear your applause. Yes, and you'd be more than welcome to this rain. Joe is a great pencil drawing artist who did the covers for at least the first three CDs that I recorded. And he collects Johnny Maddox records. That's how we met. Well, let's go back to the authentic ragtime, because as I have said many times on previous broadcasts, ragtime is the first truly original American music, but it wasn't just piano music. In the old days, ragtime songs were more popular. There were hundreds, if not thousands, of ragtime songs written for every instrumental rag. And here's one of them that was very popular in 1903, written by Jerome and Schwartz. And it's called Bedilia, I Wanna Steal You. Bedilia, thank you very much. 1903, remember that was a long time ago, and in the terminology of the time, that was called a coon song, but it wasn't just any old coon song, it was an Irish coon song. Translated into modern language, you might just call it an Irish-themed ragtime song. That's Bedilia. Well, just in the last few months, I have committed to memory a really fun piece written in 1914 by F. Henry Clickman, who also wrote Knockout Drops and Dynamite Rag. And this is notable because it was written for the half and half, which was a ragtime era dance in 5/4 time. Now, for those of you who are musicians, you know very little popular music is written in 5/4 time. It's difficult to play, but I'm going to do it for you now. Here from 1914 is this piece called Drawing Room Echoes. Thank you very much. Isn't that great? One of the greatest songs you've never heard. I'm reading a comment here on YouTube. This one is new to me, and it's neat to hear a piece in 5/4 time that doesn't use the common clave pattern. I don't even know what that is. It was called the half and half in the ragtime era because essentially half of it was in 3 and half of it was in 2. At least that's my understanding of the term. How do I count it? I count it in 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, that's right. Well, I see someone else listening here from Arizona. Wish you'd take the rain. Although we hardly ever get any here in Durango, so it's really a good thing. Let's see what's next on my list. Well, happy to take requests. Go ahead and send them in. I know it takes a minute to come in on the chat sometimes. Let me check all the websites, including Twitch. I'm sorry I don't check Twitch as often as I should. Hey, Kylan. Oh, I got all the music you sent me. I'll text you about it later. And we're up to 30 on Facebook. That's great. Oh, Max. Well, it's "De Lovely" is a very famous song, a standard of the American songbook. Same with "Toot Toot Tootsie." I might play it later, but it's not a unfamiliar song by any means. I'm going to play this piece for you next, which I pulled this out because I am leaving on a very long trip tomorrow. I think many of you know that I'm playing in Maine next week, and this is about my 7th or 8th tour of the Portland, Maine area. Hope to see a few of you there. Roger, I know I'll probably see. And I have yet to really learn a song about the state of Maine. 100 years ago in the 1920s, in the ragtime era, all those old Tin Pan Alley songs are about the good old sunny South and Swanee and palm trees swaying and the warm weather in Texas and the good old friendly people in Tennessee, in the sunny South. And so it's been difficult to find a song about Maine. And I discovered this one on a record of Miss Patricola, one of the stars in the days of acoustic phonograph records. And I just loved it. And so here is the original sheet music. The song was written by Walter Donaldson, and that ought to make Bill Huffman happy. The tune is called Away Down East in Maine. And I've already committed the piece to memory, just because it's so good. From 1922, in honor of my trip tomorrow, which requires 3 flights in one day for me to get from Durango, Colorado to Portland, Maine. Here's this tune by Walter Donaldson, one of the great songwriters in American history, composer of Yes Sir, That's My Baby and My Blue Heaven. Away Down East in Maine. Thank you very much. Away Down East in Maine. That's a premier performance, probably in the last 100 years. Yeah, isn't that a catchy tune, Dave? Yeah, it's funny that so many of the Tin Pan Alley songs are about the South, even though the composers had hardly ever been out of New York City. Oh gosh, no, I've never played Ghost of the Piano. Oh, now there's a lovely request, but I think the only one of Sefton Daly's pieces I can play by heart is Color Scheme. You want to hear it? Let me know, Max. I'll play it for you. Let me see what else is on my list. Yeah, I've certainly got time for it. Yeah, let's do it. This is a novelty piano piece from late in the period, 1943, I discovered this one on my tour of Australia. Sefton Daly was very much like the Aussie Billy Merrill, and he wrote about 3 or 4 pieces that would be considered novelties. I guess 3 of them. The others are more like waltzes and tangos. And so this is my favorite of all of them, which I have committed to memory. One of the greatest songs you've never heard. Color Scheme by Sefton Daly. Thank you very much. Color Scheme by Sefton Daly. If you're curious to hear another one of his pieces, he actually appeared in an Australian movie in the 1950s, and I got a copy of the film, cut out the 2-minute segment with the pianist, and put it on my YouTube channel. You can watch that. Well, I'd like to do a couple of tunes now back to back that were recorded by the Coon Sanders Orchestra in Kansas City, one of the greatest of the 1920s dance bands. It's more what you would call a dance band than a jazz band, but it's kind of borderline either way. And I think let's do this one first. A tune from 1927, written by one of the old Tin Pan Alley writers, Harold Dixon, and it's called If You Want to Miss a Heaven on Earth, Stay Out of the South. you very much. If you want to miss a heaven on earth, stay out of the South. And for dreaming beautiful dreams. Oh, wait, let's see if I can remember the words. And you can wander under the skies, magical, marvelous skies. And for dreaming beautiful dreams, it's paradise. If you don't like banjos strumming, if you don't like people humming, if you don't like brown-eyed beautiful girls, stay out of the South. If you don't like palm trees swaying where the birds and bees are playing, and if pumpkin pie will cause you to die, stay out of the South. That's a little bit of how it goes. And now here's another tune that I was inspired to learn by the Coon Sanders record. The song was written by J. Fred Coots, one of the great American songwriters whose name is unjustly forgotten. He also wrote Love Letters in the Sand and Santa Claus is Coming to Town. Here from 1928 is Here Comes My Ball and Chain. Here comes my ball and chain. Thank you very much. Someone on YouTube says, I love that one. Well, I hope so. I didn't know that. The Coon Sanders recordings could be heard in the queue of Disney's Jungle Cruise. Now that is the most interesting trivia I think I've ever learned during one of my virtual concerts. Oh, thank you for the reminder, Isabel. Come on, people, 154 viewers and only 63 likes. Don't forget to hit that like button. It helps me with the social media algorithms. Share the live stream on your Facebook, your Twitter, whatever else you have. I'd appreciate that because I'm still trying to attract new people for these concerts. Charles, I could play that, but I'd have to dig out the sheet music for it, I'm afraid. I have another piece here on the piano that I'd like to play for you, and I haven't played it in a while. I don't know why I haven't thought of doing this before, because it's such a great song. I learned all about the huge vaudeville stars Van and Skink from Johnny Maddox, because he had met Gus Van twice actually, and told me all about poor Gus. They were huge stars, and then Joe Skink died in about 1930, and Gus Van's career never really recovered. But shortly before he died in 1929, they made a movie together for MGM, which is called They Learned About Women. And you can even buy this on DVD today. Van and Skink, of course, go back to the ragtime era. But here was the big production number from the movie they made. And The song is called Harlem Madness. Of course, the Harlem Renaissance was just beginning, and the great stride pianists were very famous at this time. But the song was written by Agger and Yellen, who were two of the white Tin Pan Alley songwriters who later went to Hollywood. And it's just a really exciting tune. Here's Harlem Madness, introduced in the movie They Learned About Women, featuring Van and Skink. Thank you very much. Harlem Madness. One of the greatest songs you've never heard. Unless some of you have, which means you must like the same kind of music that I do. Jim Moritz suggested that I play some obscure piano rolls tonight. And so yesterday I looked in a little box I have over here by my desk where I keep some of my favorite piano rolls and also the most valuable rolls. And I came up with a couple of piano rolls which I don't think I've ever played on a virtual concert. And these are special. Let's see, I gotta move this sheet music here. These are special because they're both autographed by the pianist. And it's not one of those stamped autographs. These are two piano rolls. I'll play them real quick, back to back. Played by the great stride pianist Pat Flowers. And you may say, oh, well, who the heck was Pat Flowers? He was sort of Fats Waller's protege. I was reading about him today. He moved to New York City in 1939, which is the year these rolls were made. Pat Flowers was originally from Detroit. He went to New York City and worked with Fats Waller. And when Fats Waller died tragically in 1943, Pat Flowers kind of took up where he left off, making Victor records with a lot of the same musicians. And then Pat Flowers went back to Detroit and spent the rest of his life there. And I had numerous friends that knew him personally. Johnny Maddox worked with Pat Flowers at Baker's Keyboard Lounge in Detroit. And both of these piano rolls belong to my late friend Mike Montgomery, who lived in Detroit. Excuse me. And they're both songs from the same movie, not a movie that most people have seen. Of course, I've seen it because I'm a big Bing Crosby nut. The movie's called East Side of Heaven. I don't know if you can see on the, yeah, you probably can't see on the live stream. Here's the autograph from Pat Flowers. It's a QRS piano roll of a song called That Sly Old Gentleman from Featherbed Lane, from the 1939 Bing Crosby movie, East Side of Heaven, hand played by Pat Flowers. That Sly Old Gentleman from Featherbed Lane. I thought if I was going to play one of these, I should really play them both. And this next one I think is the better of the two tunes. Again, from the same movie called East Side of Heaven, which is a Bing Crosby movie from 1939, which also starred a child star named Baby Sandy. Bing Crosby played a policeman, and I forget everything else that happened in the movie. Baby Sandy was, like a year and a half old when the movie was made, and she just passed away last year. I never got to meet her, unfortunately. So here's the other tune called Hang Your Heart on a Hickory Limb. And the piano roll says, in large writing right here, to Mike, sincerely, Pat Flowers, 1974. So this was autographed for my friend Mike Montgomery, 1974. The piano roll was made in 1939. It was a long time ago. Hang Your Heart on a Hickory Limb. your heart on a hickory limb. I almost forgot I even had those piano rolls. I'm so glad to get a chance to play them for all of you. Well, unfortunately, we are more than halfway through tonight's concert already. So if you enjoy the music, I do accept virtual tips for these concerts. All you have to do is send in a tip on PayPal or Venmo. The information is in the chat and the postings on all three websites. And if you don't trust PayPal, I have a P.O. box on my personal website for checks as well. And I do have a number of gigs coming up. Who knows how many years all of these gigs will last. I do know that this is supposed to be the last year of the Glenn Miller Festival. And I do not play that one every year. But I hope to see some of you in person. My concert's in Maine next week. Check out all the dates. I think my favorite venue is the one called Cadenza, which is like an old-fashioned cabaret, and it's tucked away on a side street and a sort of building that is bland, and you would never know there's such a wonderful music venue in Freeport, Maine. So please, if you're in the area, get some tickets, come to see my show at Cadenza. Although all of the concerts are open to the public that I'm doing next week, even the ones at Ocean View, which is a large retirement facility where my friends live. Hank and Sue Schmidt have set up this concert tour now for me 7 or 8 times, and it wouldn't happen without their help. It's almost like I need an agent to help do some of this for me. But anyhow, that's what's going on next in my life. And Roy on YouTube says, Adam, you should do a concert of old TV themes. I've never done a whole concert of that because I don't know enough of those songs, but I did do several of them one night during a concert called Famous Theme Songs. It's still on my YouTube channel. Go back and look it up. You can check it out. Well, let me play a real pretty song for you next. I assume almost all of you know who Eubie Blake was. I'm going to play a song for you by Eubie that was never published, and this became a favorite of mine years ago because of a CD that I have of the Ophelia Ragtime Orchestra, and it's a very pretty song written in about 1940 for a show that Eubie Blake did that never made it to Broadway. The show was called Tan Manhattan, and the tune, I believe it's 1940, even though it sounds very much like a song of the Great Depression. The song is called I'd Give a Dollar for a Dime. very much. I'd give $1 for a dime. Unpublished tune by Eubie Blake and I believe Andy Razaf. Yes, people are commenting on YouTube, is next Sunday dark? Unfortunately, I will not be home in time to do another virtual concert, so I think the every other week deal starts about now for the summer, because I won't be home next week. The next virtual concert will be 2 weeks from now, and then in June I'll only be doing virtual concerts every other week and throughout the summer because of my schedule at the Diamond Bell Saloon. But I'll be back 2 weeks from tonight. I'm not sure what the concert will be yet, but I will let you all know for sure. Eubie should have published it. Too good. Yeah, that's absolutely right. Oh, I'm getting a lot of great requests here tonight, Charles. I'm afraid I don't know that one either without the sheet music in front of me. Sorry about that. I don't know everything. Even though people think I do, the truth is I don't. Oh, Joy Sullivan's listening. I remember playing that for you and Ed. I had just learned it, I think, up at your house. That was his kind of song, wasn't it? I'd give $1 for a dime. Well, here's another one that's very happy and upbeat, and I don't think I have ever played this on a virtual concert. And it's a terrific tune. I still remember where I got the original sheet music. This was given to me by lovely Janice Cleary from Omaha, Nebraska. And the tune is from the early 1930s. And here's the original sheet music cover with good old Ted Lewis on the front. Song is called Dip Your Brush in the Sunshine and Keep on Painting Away. And I'm very lucky to have this. It's a fairly rare piece of music. It could be partly because it was written by two black writers at the height of the Great Depression. The words were, again, by Andy Razaf, who worked with Eubie Blake and Fats Waller. The music by J.C. Johnson. Not James P. Johnson, but J.C. Johnson, another important songwriter of the period. From 1931, here is Dip Your Brush in the Sunshine. The Ted Lewis record is just great. I, for one, really like Ted Lewis, even though he made the clarinet sound like a whistle. And I think I'll read you some of the words. They're too good, even though I can't sing them. Life is a canvas on which we can paint. Whatever picture we may, rich man and poor man, the devil, the saint, are all painting pictures each day. Some paint in colors of wonderful hue, while others use colors of strife. Every word, every thought, everything that we do goes down on our canvas of life. So dip your brush in the sunshine and keep on painting away. Make love a duty and you will find beauty wherever your eyes may stray. Life will seem worthwhile living and skies will never be gray. So dip your brush in the sunshine and keep on painting away. Just keep on painting away. very much, folks. Just dip your brush in the sunshine. Got to be careful with this old music. Well, send me some requests, everybody. I feel bad. I don't think I've gotten to as many of them as I should tonight. And sometimes it takes a minute for the requests to come in on the chat, so I'll just wait a minute and check all three websites here. Looks like we have a chat bot on Twitch. Sorry about that. Ha. I'm reading the Twitch comments here. What would happen if I got 111,000 here? What does that mean? Viewers? Well, I'd appreciate it. That's all I can say. Okay, I see some good requests here. I might play Amarous because I need a slow one. I need to rest for a minute. Let me do that. Sandcastle is great too. That's the rag by Ian Whitcomb. I think I played that not too long ago. So let's do Amarous. This is a very beautiful French waltz. It's not ragtime at all, really, but I learned it from Johnny Maddox, and my recording of it was used on the Canadian TV show Murdoch Mysteries. So, here from 1900 is Amarous. you so much. Amoureux. Well, in searching around in my brain to think of songs to play for tonight's concert, the greatest songs you've never heard, I thought about the music from the movie King of Jazz. It was made in 1930 by Universal Pictures, and the entire movie essentially starred Paul Whiteman and his orchestra. It was Bing Crosby's first movie, and I play Happy Feet all the time. So I thought, why not play one of the other songs from the movie that is not performed as often? And here is a rare copy of the sheet music that doesn't mention the movie. This is an independent publication of the song that was used in the movie. Perhaps it came out just a little bit before it was used in the movie. I'm not really sure which is first. This is probably one of the more rare Bing Crosby sheets in my collection as well. You can see Bing and the Rhythm Boys. They're in the corner on the sheet music. The tune is called So the Bluebirds and the Blackbirds Got Together. The music was written by Harry Barris, who's one of the Rhythm Boys. Words by Billy Mole. Okay, the copyright date's 1929. This publication probably came out just a little bit before the movie. And of course, Harry Barris also wrote some of Bing's other hits like Wrap Your Troubles in Dreams and so forth. If you've ever seen the movie, I'm going to do my best to imitate the performance. Here's So the Bluebirds and the Blackbirds Got Together. Thank you very much. That's the way Harry Barris ended a song. Well, let's do one of the other songs from King of Jazz, which was the first full-length two-strip Technicolor musical. And here's one of the other tunes that was almost a hit, but not quite. We're going to do Ragamuffin Romeo. Thank you very much, Ragamuffin Romeo from King of Jazz. Well, I've got time for maybe one or two more requests here, folks. Go ahead and send them in. Don't be shy. Do my best to play them. If I don't know the song by heart, I really can't do it. I have to see the sheet music to learn things. Yeah, I finally got 174 viewers here on YouTube. I guess we're at, we're about 2 people shy. Well, if you count Twitch, we're over 200 viewers tonight. That's terrific. That's really terrific. Got a few more things on my list I'll play for you in the event that I don't get any other requests. I see one here I could play for sure. Well, I've received a request multiple times now. This is from Carmen on YouTube for a piece that was written by Johnny Maddox. And it's one of those tunes that should have been a hit. Woulda, coulda, shoulda, if only somebody famous had recorded it. He wrote this in the 1990s when he and Fredette used to spend time down in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. He was walking along the beach one day and he said this melody came to his mind because Fredette loves tangos. It's called Tango Fredette. Thank you very much. Dave says that is an exceptionally beautiful piece. Yes, it is. Johnny really was not a frequent composer, but I'm sure his lady friend Fredette inspired him when it comes to that piece. Well, we're drawing towards the end of the program. I don't think I've mentioned yet that I stole the title of tonight's concert, The Greatest Songs You've Never Heard, from my good friend Alex Hassan, who's an excellent pianist, and I also buy way too much sheet music from him. He used that as the title of a CD It's not just Alex, it's really the trio that he performs with called Three for a Song. And I just thought it was a wonderful title and would kind of allow me to play whatever I wanted. But I went back and I looked at that CD called The Greatest Songs You've Never Heard. And one of the titles on there was By a Waterfall, which is from the movie Footlight Parade. And I thought, well, I do an entire medley of songs from Footlight Parade. Let's end the concert with these songs tonight. It's one of the great American musicals. And, oh dear, my sheet music is getting stuck together here. These songs were fairly well known at the time. It's a situation where maybe they're not too well known today, but they're really remarkable songs. Here's the sheet music cover of By a Waterfall, which features a dance sequence by Busby Berkeley, who's a great choreographer. And the three tunes that I do are Honeymoon Hotel, By a Waterfall will be the one in the middle, and then the whole thing winds up with Shanghai Lil, which is the song that Jimmy Cagney sang towards the end of the movie. So here we go with my Footlight Parade medley. I appreciate all of you listening tonight, and always. The virtual concerts really have helped my career. My mother asked me the other day, she said, "You don't still make that much money doing that, do you?" And I said, "Yeah, that's why I have to continue doing it." It's been very helpful to my career, and I hope you all enjoy the tunes. You know I like playing for you. I'm not sure what the next concert will be, but I will see you 2 weeks from tonight. And good night for now, folks. Thanks again.